everybody. I'm Kit Rosewater, and my debut book, The Derby Daredevils, just came out on Tuesday, March 24th. I forget days anymore. This is the first book in an illustrated middle grade series through Abrams. And actually, well, since it's like show and tell time, I also have the second book. This is an arc, which is coming out in September 15th of this year, 2020. Let's see. A couple things about myself. The Derby Daredevils, definitely not the first book I finished. Maybe the third or fourth book that I finished, but I've done so many like rewrites and drafts of earlier books, it feels like the 50th book. But I love this project so much. So basically, this is a series about a junior roller derby team, and the series has rotating protagonists. So book one, the kind of subtitle is Kenzie Kickstarts a Team, and it's all about Kenzie. Kenzilla is her derby name, and her best friend Shelly, whose derby name is Shelly Baum. And basically, when a junior roller derby league opens up in Austin, Texas, they really want to join together, but they realize that if they try out each on their own, they could get placed on completely different teams. The only way for the dynamic duo to stick together is if they try out with a fully formed team of their own. The problem is they don't know anybody else who's interested in roller derby. So that's like the little premise of book one. Let's see. So for the inspiration behind the Derby Daredevils, it's actually pretty similar to Ariane in that while living in Austin, Texas, I didn't say this earlier, but I grew up and now live in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And but while I wrote the first book of the Derby Daredevils, I was living in Austin, Texas, while my husband was going to graduate school, and we were at a roller derby bout. There's roller derby in Albuquerque, but I didn't know about that till we came back. Roller derby is super big in Austin, Texas. If anyone's seen Whip It, it takes place in Austin, Texas. It's that roller derby movie that Drew Barrymore directed and Ellen Page starred in. And they have two different leagues. They have a banked track league that's it's basically what's featured in Whip It, where people can go really fast. And then they also have a flat track league, which is, you mostly find flat track leagues. And I was at a roller derby bout, and I saw this group of girls standing off to the side, and I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, that just looks like such a fun and like really like diverse group. And I just wanted to write about them on the track. And I actually was smack in the middle of another book I was having so many problems with revising. And it was a darker book. And so I was like, I kind of want to write something fun. And my agent was super supportive of that. And the funny thing was that like my journey to publishing has been a really long one and slow and hard. And I've gone through multiple agents. I've done so many rewrites of books, but the weird thing about the Derby Daredevils was that just came lightning fast. I wrote the first draft in 2 weeks, but it was a chapter book at that time, so it was a lot shorter. And basically from the time that I got the idea to write the book, from the time that we sold the book, was 6 months, which was insane, especially because my first book, that process was 7 years. And then like, got set aside. So there's no rules, there's no timeline. And yeah, I've been really fortunate with this series, but part of me thinks that the reason why we've had such a smooth ride is because I had to stumble over so many previous books and like learn and grow as a writer.
Guys' tips on world building, even in a contemporary setting.
Yeah, you know, whenever I'm thinking about specifically world building with a story, I actually really like that the question included like this thing about like videos to watch, because I specifically like to immerse myself into like whatever world, like in this case, it was just downtown Austin, that's going to be the setting. And so I think that for me, whenever I'm specifically like world building for contemporary, the most important thing to me is whose lens are we using to see the world around us? Because I think that really is what I'm using for world building when it's contemporary. And I don't want to see it through my adult lens. I want to see it through like this much. I want to see it through a younger lens, but even more specifically, I remember when I was a kid, but middle grade age. That's right when I was starting to feel like the close world around me, like my neighborhood, my school, the places where I hung out. Like I just remember kind of feeling like queen of that land, you know? And so you feel really cool when you start to get old enough to kind of, you know, have like realm over your, or like just that like you know your surroundings so well that they become like, you know, kind of part of your identity. And
Some
so
ownership.
yeah, you do have an ownership of just like the places that you like to hang out and the places that you like to go, because like you're a big kid now. And so I like to listen to music that I think my characters would like to be listening to, and that helps me kind of construct how they see the world around them. I like to, I have not written a lot of stories set in places I haven't been. I like to do my own exploring um, as I'm world building for my settings. So that's really important to me. But yeah, the most important thing I think is that sometimes I'm not all about portraying things accurately as they are, as the way I see them in a contemporary landscape. It's more so portraying them to show what they can reveal about how the characters see that setting. And so like the girls in the Derby Daredevils, they very much feel like they are like the queens of downtown Austin. And so I wanted them to feel that specifically, rather than kind of like describe it as like this scary big city place. For me, the biggest tip that I would say is just don't underestimate that audience at all. Don't underestimate that age category as characters or as readers. I was like Ariane, I was a middle school teacher for 5 years, and those kids are so smart, so clever, so witty, so freaking hilarious.
Oh yeah.
That anytime you write something and you think, well, I don't find this funny, but maybe kids will, they won't. They're like way above our level. So my biggest tip is that like you're aiming high to please that audience, and right, just don't underestimate them. To me, they're like superheroes, you know. Like a huge motif in book one is that Kenzie, you know, really imagines herself like as like this star roller derby player, and so do I. So did I the whole time while I was writing about them. And whenever I write about kids, I want to specifically write about like these are people who like are heroes and innovators and artists. So yeah, that's probably my biggest takeaway from writing for middle grade.
Kit.
There you go.
I might be the only weirdo that went kind of the other way. My personality, I'm such a plotter. And I think I plotted so much that when I got a story idea, I was like paralyzed. I couldn't actually write any prose until I knew everything that was going to happen. But I took it way too far, and I'd be like, I want this book to be 55,000 words. And then like I'd break it up by I mean, it was terrible, where I'd be like, all right, this chapter can be 1,200 words, go. And so I've actually had to like loosen the constraints a little bit with some of my projects to feel the flow. But in general, I am a huge Save the Cat writes a novel user as well. I do really, really love plotting, because I don't actually think it has to dictate every single thing that happens in your book. So it won't take away all the fun surprises that you still get from writing a first draft or revising. But I think, Jessica Brody, who wrote the adaptation of Save the Cat into Save the Cat writes a novel, she talks about this is not so much being like a cliche formula, more so as like a language of storytelling. And I really, really like that, because I think that when you think about all those things ahead of time, they really help you with the writing, but they don't necessarily tell you exactly what to write. So you can still have lots of fun. You know, I actually think I was really, really fortunate with the Derby Daredevils in that the first draft began as a chapter book. It was really, really hard to write a chapter book that's about half the length of it's about half the length of what it is now, and that would have already been a really short middle grade. So because of that, the revising process was really just more about kind of expanding and adding scenes, and that was really fun. Like Ariane, there's one joke. I'm not even going to say which joke. It made it really far. Well, I mean, it's in there now, but it wasn't pointed out until my copy editor was just like, and she didn't say this joke is landing. It was just clear that she didn't get it was a joke because she was just like, wait, why would they do this? And I was like, because it's funny. And I'm pretty good. I love getting notes and feedback and criticism, and I'm not actually that stubborn with things. But in that one, I was like, no, it's funny. I know this is funny. So I held on to that. But actually, the revision process was very smooth. The thing, I was looking at that question again, the thing that I fought the most for, like if I gave pushback, it was actually on who my illustrator was, because this is an illustrated series. Out of like 150 pages, there's over 75 illustrations, so it's very heavily illustrated. And I'm just gonna like hold up her name. I'm in love with Sophie Escobase's work. She's like the best illustrator on the scene, I think. And when it came time to kind of figure out who our illustrator was going to be, I was like, it has to be Sophie. So but probably that's where I gave the most push on anything.
Do in middle grade that you can't really do in other age genres. I'll start with Kit and then Carolyn and Ariane, just because that's how you're appearing on my screen.
Okay, sounds good. I've always known that I wanted to write middle grade, even though writing the Derby Daredevils as a chapter book was really fun. I think what's really, really special about middle grade is it's a huge transformation in one's life when they're that age. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say that I think it's like the most magical, wonderful time for kids. I know it wasn't for me, but the reason why I've always known that I wanted to write for middle grade was because that's where I retreated. And that's where I found a lot of solace and help when I was confused, and, you know, a lot of personalities and friends in characters. And basically, I think that that's really when my relationship with books got really strong, was when I was in those middle school years. And there is something about being in the age where we're changing so much between, like, you know, childhood and adulthood, that almost seems like all the possibilities are open. So, you know, at that age, it did seem really possible that, like, yeah, why not? An owl could bring me a letter and I could go off to Hogwarts, because everything's changing so much anyway, you know. Maybe I'm magical, or maybe I'm, like, you know, maybe I have this secret. There's this secret in my family I'm going to find, or maybe I'm going to surprise myself with what I'm capable of. I just think it's a wonderful, wonderful time of possibility for kids. So that's why I love writing for middle grade. Just a little bit of context. So like I said, the main character of this book is Kenzie, and she's trying to form a team with her best friend, Shelley. And in this scene, Kenzie and Shelley have managed to gather enough people for their team. However, they quickly discover that they are the only two who have actually really roller skated before. So they're trying to get in, but time is like catching up to them. They don't have a lot of time to look for other people or to train more. So they're trying to get in a quick training practice before the big tryouts for the Derby League. And we get to see how these kids kind of just interact together on the track for the first time. So Kenzie dumped the padding next to a bench and sat down to change into her skates. Jules flew out of the door a minute later, followed by Tomoko. Camilla emerged last. She was carrying her skates like they might bite her. Shelley turned to Kenzie, but Kenzie pretended to be busy tying her own skates. Okay, guys, Kenzie said, make sure your laces are good and tight. Jules stretched her laces taut as she yanked them over and under each loop. They're so tight they might break my foot, she said proudly. Well, don't cut off circulation, Shelley said. The point is to not let them get loose. Oh, they won't, Jules assured her. Tomoko wrapped her laces around her ankle and knotted them in front. Whoa, Shelley said. It took me months before I figured out how to tie them like that. Tomoko blushed. I was watching you guys, she said. Kenzie buckled her helmet and stood up. She clapped her hands the way Miss Moss had done at rehearsal. Fasten your elbow pads and hustle to the court. places. These are really heavy, Camila said. She lifted a foot, then let the skate clack onto the ground. You'll get used to it, Kenzie said. Your feet will slide more than walk anyway. Camila frowned and tied her laces into a neat bow. No, you have to tie them a lot tighter than that, Shelley said, or the skates will fly off your feet. They will? Camila asked. She looked down at her skates in horror. Leave her alone, Kenzie said. You're scaring her. Shelley threw her hands up. I'm trying to help. Tomoko pushed off from the bench. Whoa, she said. She wobbled her arms a moment, then held them out like she was walking on a tightrope. She kicked one of her legs and propelled herself forward. That's great, Shelley said. Make sure your legs go out to the side, not right behind you. Okay, Tomoko said. She steadied herself and bent her knees, then rolled one skate out, then the other. Kenzie was impressed that Tomoko hadn't fallen right off the bat. Maybe they really would have a superstar team after all. All right, before I turn the page, this is just a little Sophie illustration of them tying their skates. Hi-ya, Jules yelled. She jumped up on her skates, then collapsed in a jumbled heap. There's Jules right there. Before anyone could help her up, Jules pushed herself back up to standing. She reached out toward Tomoko and lunged again. Hi-ya! Kenzie watched as Jules went down like a stick building that had been blown over by the big bad wolf. Kenzie's cheeks flushed. I can't fall like that, Camila said. I bruise easily. That's okay, Shelley said. Bruises are really normal here. Camila shot a bewildered look at Kenzie. She kept a death grip on the bench as she stood up. Try letting go, Shelley said. Camila froze. Her hand was firmly wrapped around the back of the bench. She whimpered and sat back down. I can't, she cried. Kenzie gave a long and low sigh. Well, that's just great, Shelley said, rolling her eyes. We'll knock 'em dead tomorrow. And this might be my favorite illustration in the, well, one of my favorite illustrations in the book, where we're seeing the dynamics. And basically what has happened is that Kenzie, our protagonist, has told Camila that roller derby was just like a pretend play. And so we're seeing that kind of fib catch back up to her. So once this later, but I want to announce it to the launch. One thing I have done to try to help with things like signed copies, since so many of the signed copies can't go anywhere, is that anyone who does order, I'm going to have an email address that I use called thederbydaredevils@gmail.com. And I've just put in another order for another like 100 or so signed, well, book plates that I can sign and inscribe personal messages on. And was for pre-orders, but now it's just for anybody who wants a book plate in these times. All you have to do is email thederbydaredevils@gmail.com. Doesn't matter where you get your book, and I can send you a signed book plate.